The world was living in a dark time where wars, strife, and corruption were rampant. In this time, prophecies and predictions spoke of the emergence of a savage people called Gog and Magog. At the end of times, rumors spoke of a people with small eyes, dull golden noses, and faces like sledgehammers. It was said that they were distinguished by long tails like those of animals, and that they fed on everything they came across. This news spread among the people, but some considered it mere fantasy with no connection to reality. However, events accelerated, and signs indicated that the end of times was approaching. One day, the sky began to show strange signs. As clouds began to dissipate and transform into frightening shapes in the sky that night, the earth began to tremble violently, and there was a loud sound heard throughout the world. After that, strange phenomena began to occur as the earth began to crack and erupt, and fires began to rise from the ground. In the early morning, people began to see something strange appearing on the horizon, and this thing moved quickly towards them. After moments, a large group of strange creatures appeared in front of the people, and their characteristics matched the description mentioned in the prophecies. A people with small eyes, dull golden noses, and faces like sledgehammers, and they had long tails like those of animals. After the people saw them, they were overcome by shock and fear, and began to flee in all directions, but there was no escape from them, as they had invaded the earth in large numbers and came from all sides. The people continued to watch them in shock and extreme fear, as they moved quickly and sparkled, and they swept everything they encountered in places, cities, villages, and farms, and fed on everything they came across, including plants, animals, and even rocks. It seemed that these strange creatures had been released from the dam that was holding them, and the earth had finally expelled them. People believed that this situation would end at any moment, but the situation continued to escalate day after day. With time, these strange creatures spread throughout the world and reproduced quickly. Until their numbers reached millions of creatures, they enjoy strength, violence, and savagery, and roam the surroundings in search of things they could feed on. These strange creatures tried to enter cities, villages, and homes, attacking humans and eating them, and gnawing at even stones and rocks. They left behind severe destruction, chaos, and ruin. People felt despair and fear of these strange creatures, and wondered about their fate and the future of the world. The strange appearance of these savage creatures was a warning of the end of the world and extinction. As events continued to unfold, people began to realize that these strange creatures were a people called Gog and Magog, as mentioned in the prophecies. This increased people's fear and made them feel that they were at the end of times. With the spread of these strange creatures throughout the world, the situation became more and more dangerous and serious, leading to chaos and a severe collapse in people's lives. These strange creatures were a sign of a great catastrophe that was about to occur as the world continued to suffer from the havoc caused by the emergence of Gog and Magog. People sought refuge and protection from these savage creatures. Some built walls and fortifications to protect themselves, while others sought shelter in remote areas away from the reach of these creatures. One of the most famous and historically significant walls was the Great Wall of China. This wall, which stretches over 13,000 miles, was built over centuries to protect China from invasions by various peoples and armies. As the world descended into chaos, people began to speculate whether the Great Wall of China would be able to protect against the invasion of Gog and Magog. The prophecies had spoken of Gog and Magog as a people who would bring destruction to the world, and no wall or fortification could stand against them. Despite this, some still held on to the hope that the Great Wall of China would protect them. However, as time passed, reports began to emerge of Gog and Magog approaching the wall from the north. People watched in horror as the creatures approached the wall, their numbers so great that they seemed to stretch as far as the eye could see. As they drew closer, people could see the fierce and savage look in their eyes and the long tails that wagged behind them like those of animals. The defenders of the Great Wall braced themselves for the inevitable attack, but to their surprise, the creatures did not attempt to climb or breach the wall. Instead, they stood at the base of the wall, staring up at it with a strange fascination. Days passed, and the creatures remained at the base of the wall, seemingly intent to simply observe. Some of the defenders began to grow complacent, thinking that the creatures had lost interest and would eventually move on. But then one day the creatures began to dig. They dug with a ferocity and determination that shocked the defenders, and within hours they had tunneled beneath the wall and emerged on the other side. The defenders of the Great Wall were caught off guard, and many were killed in the ensuing chaos. The creatures poured through the breach in the wall, their savage hunger driving them to attack and consume everything in their path. The news of the breach in the Great Wall spread quickly, and people around the world began to realize the true extent of the threat posed by Gog and Magog. They were not a people to be stopped by mere walls or fortifications, but a force of destruction and chaos that would stop at nothing to satiate their hunger. As the creatures continued their rampage, some began to wonder if there was any hope left for humanity. The prophecies had warned of the emergence of Gog and Magog, but they had also spoken of a final battle between good and evil that would ultimately determine the fate of the world. Only time would tell if humanity was capable of rising to the challenge and facing the forces of darkness that threatened to consume them. As the spread of Gog and Magog expanded throughout the world, people began to see the true scope of the threat posed by these monstrous creatures. Prophecies had spoken of Gog and Magog as a people who caused destruction in the world, and no wall or fortress could stand against them. And now, those prophecies were gradually being fulfilled. During this time, Gog and Magog were spreading rapidly around the world, eating everything in front of them with their long teeth. They ate even sand and rocks, and gnawed on walls and fences in search of food. The earth shook with their heavy steps, and the terrible sound they made, and nothing could stop them. They continued to advance, threatening to swallow everything in their path. These monstrous creatures entered some cities and urban areas, and dealing with them became an extremely difficult problem. They caused great destruction and chaos wherever they went, and it was difficult for armies and defenders to defeat them. Meanwhile, Some people tried to find ways to deal with Gog and Magog. Some tried to coexist with them and provide them with food, while others tried to find ways to kill them. Others headed to remote areas far from Gog and Magog's reach. In an attempt to survive, they built shelters and hideouts to protect themselves and their families, and tried to continue living in any way possible. As the number of Gog and Magog increased, people began to look for ways to stop their spread and find solutions to confront them. At this time, scientists began to work on developing new techniques and methods to combat Gog and Magog, including using modern weapons and new protection techniques. Armies and fighters were trained on how to deal with these monstrous creatures, and strategic plans were developed to confront them. However, the battle was ongoing, and it was difficult for human armies to win. In addition, scientists began to look for ways to deal with Gog and Magog without violence. They studied their behavior and lifestyle patterns, and tried to find ways to stop their spread without using force. While some considered Gog and Magog a disaster for humanity, others saw them as part of the Earth's biodiversity. Although they caused destruction wherever they went, they were part of the natural environment of the Earth. In the end, Gog and Magog were a great challenge for humanity, and people continue to try to find ways to deal with this monstrous threat. It will undoubtedly require ongoing efforts and global cooperation to find effective solutions to this problem. As the spread of Gog and Magog continued, humanity faced an unprecedented challenge. The monstrous creatures had multiplied rapidly, and their numbers had exceeded those of humans. They were spreading across the world, causing destruction and chaos wherever they went. In response, governments and organizations around the world worked tirelessly to find solutions to this global problem. They developed various strategies and plans to confront Gog and Magog, including building stronger walls and fortifications to keep them out. One of the most ambitious projects was the construction of a massive wall that stretched across continents from Europe to Asia. This wall was designed to be impenetrable, with advanced technologies and defenses to keep Gog and Magog at bay. The construction of the wall took many years and required significant resources and manpower, but eventually it was completed, and it became a symbol of humanity's determination to survive in the face of this monstrous threat. The wall was successful in keeping Gog and Magog out of many regions, and it gave humanity some breathing room to regroup and develop new strategies to confront them. However, it was not a complete solution, and Gog and Magog continued to pose a significant threat. As the years passed, humanity continued to fight against Gog and Magog, with armies and fighters trained in how to deal with these monstrous creatures. Scientists developed new weapons and technologies to combat them, and strategic plans were constantly updated to account for their evolving behavior. Finally, the day of the final battle arrived. Gog and Magog had gathered in vast numbers, and they were preparing to launch a massive assault on the wall and the human forces defending it. The battle was intense and brutal, with both sides suffering heavy losses, but in the end, humanity emerged victorious. The wall held strong, and the armies of Gog and Magog were defeated. It was not a complete victory, however. Gog and Magog were not completely eradicated, and they continued to exist in isolated pockets around the world. But the threat they posed was greatly diminished, and humanity had proven that it was capable of standing up to even the most monstrous of challenge. In the aftermath of the final battle, humanity worked to rebuild and recover from the devastation caused by the long struggle against Gog and Magog. The wall remained a symbol of humanity's resilience and determination, and it served as a reminder of the great sacrifices that had been made to protect the world from this monstrous threat. And while the memory of Gog and Magog lingered on, humanity could take comfort in the knowledge that it had overcome one of the greatest challenges in its history, and that it had emerged stronger and more united as a result. The world was forever changed by the events of the Gog and Magog invasion. The destruction and horror that had been unleashed had left deep scars on the planet and its inhabitants. But as the dust settled and the smoke cleared, humanity began the long and difficult process of rebuilding. Cities and towns that had been destroyed were slowly rebuilt, and communities worked together to create a new sense of normalcy in a world that had been turned upside down. But the wounds left by the Gog and Magog invasion were not just physical. The psychological impact of the event was felt by all who had survived. Many struggled with post-traumatic stress disorder, haunted by the memories of the horrors they had witnessed. Others were plagued by survivor's guilt, struggling to come to terms with why they had lived while so many others had died. The world had been forever changed by the Gog and Magog invasion, and the scars it left behind would take years to heal. But even in the midst of the rebuilding process, humanity faced new challenges. The Gog and Magog had left behind a world that was almost unrecognizable. The ecosystems had been disrupted, and many species of plants and animals had been pushed to the brink of extinction. The air and water were polluted, and the damage to the environment was immense. But humanity was determined to learn from the mistakes of the past. Governments and organizations around the world began to work together to create a sustainable future. They developed new technologies to clean up the environment and to create cleaner sources of energy. The world slowly began to heal, and a new sense of hope emerged. People began to work together to create a brighter future for themselves and for future generations. They knew that the world would never be the same again, but they were determined to make it a better place. As the years passed, the memories of the Gog and Magog invasion began to fade, but the lessons that had been learned would never be forgotten. Humanity had been pushed to the brink of extinction, but they had emerged stronger and more determined than ever before. The world had been forever changed, but in the end, it was the indomitable spirit of humanity that had prevailed. After the long period of destruction and chaos caused by Gog and Magog, the surviving humans in Mecca gathered around the Kaaba in an attempt to find hope and faith in God. People spoke in silence, filled with sorrow and grief, as they remembered their loved ones and friends who were lost in the previous period. At this time, a sheikh appeared, whom people believed was sent by God. The sheikh began reciting certain verses from the Quran, and within moments, people began turning to dust on the spot. This was the sad end of people's lives, but they believed it was their ultimate fate, and that they would return to their Lord. After everyone turned to dust, deep silence settled in the place, and only debris and scattered items remained everywhere. This end, despite all that happened, was the real beginning of a new world. After humans were gone, the planet began to renew itself, and the world became a completely different place. The earth lived in peace and quiet, and there was no anxiety or noise. Nature, which was immersed in blood, had returned to its original state. In this new world, people lived in peace and cooperation, where communities based on high morals and principles were developed. Instead of the immense challenges they faced in the past, people now worked together to create a better and more sustainable society. Life in this new world relied heavily on faith in God, cooperation, and solidarity among people. Although people lived in a new world, they carried memories of the past with them and used these memories to shape a better future. In the end, life in the new world depended on hope and faith in God and hard work to create a sustainable and ideal society. Although people's lives had ended, they believed they would return to their Lord and find eternal peace in paradise. This end, despite all the pain and challenges that humans faced, was a new beginning for life and hope in the new world.